Welcome to Let's Plant New Jersey. Thank you so much for joining us on this Arbor Day and last day of Earth Month. My name is Susan Haig. I'm a member of the South Orange Green Team, conductor of the South Orange Symphony, and board member founder of CivicStory. And I'd like to thank the South Orange Public Library for co-presenting this event, and Michael Pucci for tech support and communications. And I'd also like to thank the Let's Plant New Jersey steering team, Debbie Mance, partner of 2020 Public Affairs, Martha Sword, a super active volunteer in Princeton, Tobias Fox, whom you'll hear from later, and Jessica Miller of the South Orange Green Team. This program began as a follow-up to Douglas Tallamy's talk last Monday through the Summit Public Library, and you can access that fabulous talk through the library's website. So we were asking, what are the basic action steps for converting some of our lawn, both private and public land, to native plants and insects, so that pollinators will love them? So where do you start if this is all new for you? But then the program became something more. How can we ensure that all people, including young children, have full access to nature, native plants, healthy food, air, soil, and water? And what jobs and careers in ecology can young people prepare for? So all these themes will be woven together tonight in a bit of an improvisation. But our key step, we know, is to encourage youth to take the lead because they're such great stewards and change makers. So before we have our 6 speakers, I'm thrilled to introduce our co-moderator, Frida Ruiz. Frida is a graduating senior at Union County Votech High School in Scotch Plains and will attend Princeton University this fall. Frida co-founded the Green Cause to engage students and teachers in her hometown of Cranford in sustainable practices. And she spoke just this week to the Alliance for New Jersey Environmental Education, known as ANGE. So Frida, can you just kick us off briefly? Tell us why you founded the Green Cause and what impact it's had.
Yeah, thank you so much for the lovely introduction, Susan. So it all was inspired from me just walking around my community center, and I saw that kids around, younger than me, they were looked around to be around 4th grade, were just littering and not really taking accountability for their actions, and didn't know what they were doing was really harming their environment, their planet. So I thought, well, this isn't entirely their fault because they weren't really taught about the harms in like a large way, right? Maybe just a glancing by and like a lesson, but it's not anything that's really focused. It's not something that's really integrated into daily lessons like it should be, as this is a very urgent issue. So I had thought to myself, well, I can take the knowledge that I've had from high school, as I am in a vocational program where I have learned a lot about different environmental concepts that should have other people know about them as well. Like other people should know about them as well, not just me or not just the classmates. So I decided to talk with a colleague of mine, and we thought it was a great idea to think about forming an alliance, a group where other high schoolers who thought just like me could be able to create their own lessons for elementary and middle schools and really partner with the different classes and really present. And I think so far we've had great impact. We've had over 9 different classes be able to participate and partake in some of our members' hard work. And it's been so great to just see their faces light up when our members are just asking questions and being very, very engaging, as it should be, as education should be. It should get people to think. So, and we're really hoping to keep on going, keep on moving. So thank you.
Great, well, congratulations on that dynamic leadership, and we'll have to let Princeton University know that there are big changes when you arrive on campus in the fall. So just before we start, we want to lay out the shape of the evening. We'll have 3 speakers with a quick follow-up question from Frida. Then we'll have a crowdsourced brief intermission where we share retailers and garden centers that we know are carrying native plants, and we'll want to hear from our audience. And then we'll have the other 3 speakers followed by a Q&A that will be moderated by Debbie Mance. So I want to thank the members of our steering committee. They've just been great to work with. So our first speaker, Amanda Nesheiwat, Deputy Director of Sustainability and Community Outreach for the Hudson County Improvement Authority. She's an adjunct professor at Ramapo College. She was recipient of the North Jersey Young Environmental Innovator Award and was voted Woman of the Year in Hudson County in 2018. Amanda attended Ramapo College and Bergen Community College earlier and holds a master's in sustainability management from Stevens Institute of Technology. Amanda, you've had a vision for New Jersey's environmental leadership for years, and we're excited to hear what you're doing now and how native plants might relate to your role in Hudson County. Welcome.
Thank you so much, and thanks so much for the invitation to be here with you all today. Everyone that's on this call has been inspirational to me for many years, actually. As Susan said, I'm the Deputy Director of Sustainability for the Hudson County Improvement Authority. I've been there for about a year, and I'll get to that in a minute. But I was previously the Environmental Director of Sea Caucus, and that's really where my story about native plants started. As somebody that had to really develop new sustainability goals and initiatives for a town, obviously one of the things that was troubling to me is that we were planting a lot of ornamental plants, and we had a lot of just plain old grass that we had to mow quite often with, gas-powered lawnmowers. And of course, that was driving me a little bit insane. So I decided to talk with our landscapers, some that work for the community and some that we contract with. And when I brought up the subject of native plants, I felt like I kept getting brushed off. They didn't really know what native plants were. It took me a little while to understand that, maybe the term native plants was not something that was familiar to a lot of people. It wasn't necessarily familiar to me until years after, I learned in college what native plants do and how beneficial they are. So I also found that when our landscapers approached the nursery that we contract with, which a lot of other municipalities contract with, they didn't necessarily have a space for native plants or really know what to show you when you ask for native plants. So what we decided to do to kind of take the fear and make it a lot more easier for our landscapers is I decided to create a pilot program. And this is kind of my secret that I have continuously used throughout my government career for the past decade. When you call something a pilot program, it's a lot more easy to say yes to. You don't have a lot of financial commitment. It's a temporary project. If it's not successful, it goes away and you never have to hear about it again. And then I'd be blamed for it, basically. No one else does. And so we decided to do a pilot program and plant wildflowers. These wildflowers are the same wildflowers that you see on the highway corridors in New Jersey. We ended up calling the state of New Jersey, asking them where they get their wildflower seeds. And we also purchased some native grasses that we ended up finding at a nursery in New Jersey as well. So we planted that in a small section of Sea Caucus, and it was a pretty easy project to do. And they were so beautiful, and the mayor of the community loved them so much. The DPW, the Department of Public Works of Sea Caucus, had fun doing the project. We had another staff member in the environmental department maintaining them and tending to them and really showcasing them to not only the community, but also to youth. After that project, it was so successful, we decided to also do a pollinator garden. We actually got some of the suggestions for the plants that we planted in our pollinator garden from the Native Plant Society of New Jersey. And in that project, our DPW was willing to kind of get us the plants and help us out with it, and learn about some of the plants that we put that were not only beautiful, but also had benefits to the local environment and to our pollinators. And so after those two projects were completed, we had schools reaching out to us to do similar projects on their spaces. And we even had a couple of corporations reach out to us asking us if we wanted to continue expanding the program, that they'd be willing to actually donate volunteers or resources to do so. So it was such a huge, successful project in town that our DPW workers are actually a lot more willing to talk to us about planting much more native plants than a lot of the ornamentals. So now that I am working for Hudson County, I left Sea Caucus about a year ago. I'm working for Hudson County, working with the county parks. I already found what I would consider to be a champion in the county parks department, because he really kind of wants to make a difference. He really cares about going green. His young daughter really loves pollinators and actually pitched an idea to county parks to put a pollinator garden in the county parks. And I'm hoping that that will serve as a pollinator, a pilot program, so that we can get him in all of our county parks. And now that I have a few projects that I can point to, which is so beneficial working in local government, by the way, that I can point to a successful program that we can continue to replicate and scale up. I'm pretty confident that we're going to be able to put more native plants around our county parks, which actually we have very large county parks. We have about 12 municipalities and maybe almost a dozen county parks in Hudson County. So I look forward to expanding those programs, hopefully this summer, with our bee program, which we're hoping to get in one of our county parks actually this year. And couple it with a rain garden, which is also something else that I really think needs to be expanded upon in Hudson County.
You have really shown us the playbook that should be replicated everywhere. Thank you. Frida, how about a very short follow-up question? Great.
Yeah, of course. Again, that was a very insightful and lovely presentation. Just a quick question. What prepared you for the work you're doing, and what would you recommend to motivate young folks like, you know, that daughter you were mentioning, to care for the earth and nature?
Well, what got me motivated with just starting one little project in college that that was actually successful. We tried to ban styrofoam at Bergen Community College. That's where I started off my college career before I went to Ramapo College to get my bachelor's degree. Just get started, and you never know where life will take you. I ended up, after that, becoming an activist, working with local organizations like Food and Water Watch and Sierra Club and other local organizations. And that experience of organizing, good time management, and also getting the community inspired to get involved really helped me when I moved and transitioned into a government career, because that's exactly what you're doing, is inspiring people and leading by example the best that you could. And just, taking on a project and figuring it out, rolling up your sleeves and figuring out. You never know. You don't have to know everything, and you don't have to know how to do everything. You just have to be motivated enough to start and ask the right questions.
Thank you, Amanda. You are truly an inspiring example. Just great. Our second speaker is Lee Clark. Lee Clark is Environmental Justice Policy Manager for the New Jersey League of Conservation Voters. He received his Bachelor of Arts in Political Science and his Master's in Business Communication from Rider University. Lee was Field Director for the Green in 17 campaign for clean energy, water, open space, and environmental justice. He's worked on presidential and state political campaigns. He became the first African-American councilperson in Phillipsburg's 158-year history. Lee enjoys hiking New Jersey's trails, camping, fishing, kayaking with friends and family. Congratulations on your work for change, Lee, and tell us what we most need to know and learn about now.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I've actually prepared a couple of slides. I hope they won't be too long, but I'm going to share my screen. So tonight, I'll be talking about pretty much a look into equity and nature accessibility, essentially the intersectionality between race and accessibility to the outdoors. And I'll be using my own personal story as kind of a means to measure how I believe we could better act, help communities of color better access outdoors and hiking and recreation to kind of provoke more folks to get involved in this field. So with that, let's go forward. So today, my presentation can really be boiled down to 3 steps. The issue, really looking at the fact that in the environmental sphere of careers, we don't really see a lot of young people of color. I myself am the Environmental Justice Policy Manager for New Jersey League of Conservation Voters. I can literally count on my one hand of all my colleagues of color that work in the same sphere as I do. So really understanding exactly why that is. The second part will be focusing on pretty much my personal story, my childhood growing up, how I got involved in the outdoors and my love for it, and how it influenced my career choice to get into environmental advocacy. And then the third part, kind of some solutions that, based off of my personal story, that I believe would be great recommendations to help diversify the environmental space, to get more people of color involved when we're talking about native plants, hiking, outdoors activities, and really having a more diverse environmental and conservation movement. So with that, let's look at the issue offhand. So here's some statistics I've found that shows that people of color are more likely than white people to live in an area that is nature deprived. As you can see, the numbers are a huge gap. Among people of color, we are most likely to have less interaction with nature, which has a very foundational experience or effect on our involvement of getting involved in environmental careers down the road as we become older, and for opportunities as well. We also see similar statistics for low-income communities as well. More affluent communities just have more access to hiking, camping, and fishing, and therefore are able to build a more foundational understanding and appreciation for outdoor activities. So right here, I would say, is the beginning of the issue where we would have to address to get more people of color and lower income communities more excited about the environment, and to build that foundational knowledge of what it truly means to take an interest in native plants, camping, fishing, and all that. So that's where the problem really begins. Now you may be asking yourself, well, why are the numbers skewed this way to begin with? Well, I also answer that question as well. So when we look into the barriers, it can really come down to 5 major areas, and it's all systemic at its roots. When it comes to redlining communities, the historical taking of Native American lands, being forced off those lands into reservations and not being properly compensated as years have gone by for the lost land. Underrepresentation of people of color in public land service agencies, which are still predominantly white, and people of color feeling unsafe or even threatened on hiking trails or in open spaces, because it's a very unfamiliar area for many of us. And there are stereotypes that do have to be addressed, because when you're entering into a space that is historically and overwhelmingly white, there are stereotypes that do need to be adjusted to create more safe spaces for people of color to feel more comfortable to engage. And then also traditionally excluded from the U.S. Conservation movement. As we know, historically, this has been a movement that has been overwhelmingly white, overwhelmingly male, and overwhelmingly of wealthy people who could afford to take conservation on as more of a hobby or a side thing upon retirement. So these are really the 5 areas that cause this systemic issue that really lower the numbers for people of color to get more involved. And because of this, we see less people of color taking on careers in environmentalism, whether it's in the sciences or in the advocacy space, but they all are related in some way. So now that we have a better understanding of what the issue is and why it is, I would like to offer who I am in my personal story. Essentially, despite all these barriers, how did I end up here? In my 29 years of life, I've summed it down to 3 chapters. So the first one is right here. Gotta go back. Forget you saw that slide. So essentially connecting to nature. So I've included some photos of myself when I was younger. These are my teenage years. I'm a native New Jersey, and I should start off with that. But I spent a lot of my life going back and forth between New Jersey and Eastern Pennsylvania, which tend to be very rural. So because I did grow up in rural Pennsylvania, I had an accessibility to nature. I grew up around farmland and open space. from a very young age, starting from the age of 6, I learned how to hike, how to fish, how to camp. So from a very young age, it was embedded in me an appreciation for nature, for the animals, and all this great stuff that I've carried on into my older years, in my old age of 29, right? I've also found that going to school in Eastern Pennsylvania, that I also had more opportunities to engage nature. Nature education was a priority in the classroom. Field trips into nature, nature hikes were a priority. So children from a very young age got to see up and close all these native plants. They got to see the big trees. They got to breathe in the clean air. They got to see the rich waters from a very young age. And I really took that for granted growing up. But it did help me become the person I am today. And I say that I've moved back between New Jersey and Pennsylvania throughout my life because I had a very unique experience. I've had the experience of living in rural areas, suburban areas, and urban areas. And moving, and part of my life, I lived in Irvington, New Jersey, and Trenton, New Jersey. And many of y'all know that that's far different from the farmlands of Catasauqua, Pennsylvania, okay? It's a very urban, very developed area. And I learned firsthand the disconnect between the communities in Irvington and Trenton and between nature. And these weren't prioritized in the school classes. Many of the children there had never even seen a dense forest before or walked through one. And I quickly learned the differences between growing up in these two areas. So that really had an effect on me. And it's something that I always kept with me. Currently, I live in Warren County, very rural, very farmland. I love it out here. But right there, I already had a foundation built within me for an appreciation for nature and the environment. But going into the next chapter of my life, I became older. I went off to college. I learned new experiences, and this was when I started entering into the chapter called Getting Active. As you can see, I've worked on many campaigns, as stated in my bio, local, state, and federal. I've worked on campaigns since I was 18 years old, and I've actually lost count of how many I've worked on. But this was important because this was when I started to create the knowledge or the perception of, or recognizing the intersection between the environment and politics and community engagement. The fact that these were interconnected somehow. And there was a way for me to conserve and protect and expand environmental experiences for everyone by getting more involved in public policy, public service, and campaigns. And a lot of my choices when I was looking at political candidates wasn't based on Democrat or Republican, it was based more on the issues. And one of my top issues based off of my upbringing was the environment and where they stood on it. So that was one of the big inspiring parts for me to get more involved in the environment. So through my volunteer work, through my paid work as a staffer, that's where I really developed and a sense of service for the environment. And it wasn't until the election of 2016, I worked on the Hillary Clinton presidential campaign. I was based in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. That was really the kick that I needed to really take it to the next chapter, to the next level. Because with that, one of my biggest concerns was after the loss, the Trump administration planned to cut the EPA budget by 31%. So this was the big part in my life where I now decided that I needed to focus on the next level of advocacy, going beyond just politics, but focusing really on my interest on the environment. So with that, it takes me to the next chapter, how I got involved with New Jersey LCV. They were looking for a field director to lead their environmental education campaign, and I was a well-experienced organizer who took on the challenge. And as you can see here, I really got into it. So my original position was for field director. It was a one-year funded grant position because the campaign itself was only for 1 year. So as you can see, our main concern was really advocating for the environment, making sure that we're making it a top priority. The year went by, we were very successful. Everyone was listening in on the environment for the first time in years, and people cared. I've now been at LCB for nearly 5 years now, taking on new roles in outreach, and now in my current position as public policy manager for EJ. So that's kind of how I fell into this amazing career of environmental advocacy. And it was only able to happen because I had an early on experience, a positive experience with the environment through hiking and studying plants and fishing. And that's really an opportunity that many people of color are deprived from a young age.
Lee, thanks.
Oh, yeah.
This has been an incredible story. You've laid it out really, really compellingly and very honestly. And we really thank you for that insight into what a difference it makes to be out there. And now we know what needs to happen. Maybe teacher training has to start in the outdoors as well. So thank you and congratulations on all you've been doing. Just amazing. And we'll have time for Q&A, by the way, for everybody in the chat at the end of the evening. But Frida, do you have a quick question?
Yeah, first of all, as everyone has been saying, your presentation has been very inspiring, and I certainly loved to hear the story that you had. And just to kind of follow up on that, what was the biggest challenge in your work with environmental justice, and what is one change you'd want to see?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges in the realm of environmental justice historically, many organizations, many color-led organizations have not had great experiences with the big green organizations, I guess you would call them, the white-led organizations. So really trying to help repair those rifts because we really want to really combine the movement together, because the environment is really one sphere, right? And we shouldn't be working against each other, we should be working together. So I guess in that respect, just learning different backgrounds from folks, continuing to learn the EJ struggle and how it still is relevant to today. Just because it's 2021 doesn't mean that there still isn't systematic racism within the environmental movement. But I do believe now the issues have become more mainstream. More people are willing to not only listen, but act. And hopefully together, we will all come together to really create policy that's meaningful and authentic moving forward so we can really tackle the big issues like climate change and energy dependencies, insecurities. So I would boil it down to that.
Thank you. Meaningful and authentic. That's really a great recipe for us. Thank you. Okay, our next speaker is Dr. Joy Barnes-Johnson. She teaches chemistry, material science, and racial literacy at Princeton High School. Her research interests are in equitable science teaching and evaluation and STEM curriculum development. Dr. Johnson received a BS in chemistry at Johnson C. Smith University, a Master of Education at Montclair State University, and her PhD in urban education and leadership from Temple University. She loves enabling students of all learning modes to thrive. And Dr. Joy, we can't wait to hear how you do that. Welcome.
Well, good evening. Thank you so much, Susan. I'm inspired by both Lee and Amanda, the things that they've said, which as a person who grew up in New Jersey, somewhere between New York and DC, I could completely understand both the need to address environmental justice from a policy perspective, as well as from a just everyday kid perspective. So a little bit about my story. If you've seen the Netflix film Radium Girls, or if you are from Orange on High Street, not too far from the Star Tavern, you know that a major Superfund site is on Alden Street at High Street. That's where I grew up. So I grew up before it was declared a Superfund site, in the backyard of Thomas Edison and the Radiant Corporation of the United States. And so growing up in the 70s and 80s in that space was great, because while we didn't have, it was by no stretch of the imagination a rural place, we had gardens, we had backyards, and we had communities. We had people of every class and sort of ethnic group living in a neighborhood that said, you know what, let's get out and play. So the wonderful part about my story is I grew up as a tree hugger between Orange Park, between Wassessing Park, Branch Brook Park, Essex County was the green space that I thoroughly enjoyed. And so whether it was looking for flowers and running from bees, I grew up sort of really curious about how to be on the planet before climate education was a thing. And so at that time, the national parks made the Thomas Edison Museum free. And so, yeah, we would just walk to the labs in West Orange and sort of be there. So that's the beginning of my story. But then, you know, it's a great thing to grow old and say, now, how can I make a difference in my community? So as I grew older, Lee is talking about his 29 years, as I grew older and became a parent and became a true city dweller, moving to Philadelphia, I looked for a neighborhood that was like the one I grew up in. So I wanted to live in a neighborhood that was diverse by class and race and ethnicity. And I bought a row home in Philadelphia, in Northeast Philadelphia, and noticed how little green space was there. And so in an effort to introduce green space back to my neighbors, the children who really had nothing but blacktop, we decided to do a small compost project in our patch of yard. And we invited that little patch of space between the street and the home for people to come and compost and turn the soil. And we did what I call a compost garden. We let whatever didn't die, we let it grow. And to our amazement, a watermelon grew. So if you like Tupac and you say, what happened to the rose that grew in the cracks of the concrete? You want to know what happened to the watermelon that grew in the cracks of the concrete? We harvested it prematurely. But in that moment, it was the most exciting part of those children's experience in that moment. And so that began my commitment to doing composting projects and planting projects with children in schools, in communities, and everywhere. And so taking it back to the school where I teach in Central New Jersey, I have a wonderful colleague, Paula Jackalou, who is a native plant guru. And so that's my story. So from my own personal love of science and engineering, my curiosity about what makes science and technology so vital, through to who I would become as a neighbor, wanting children to have green space, wanting my own child to have green space, into who I am as an educator, asking students to recognize the very thin line that connects environmental justice to social justice, to gender equality, to economic equality and everything else. Man, that's who I've come to be in my 50 years. And it has been a wonderful journey so far.
Thank you, Dr. Joy. Over to you, Frida.
Yeah, so as mentioned on your bio, you teach high school students. And as a high school student, I of course want to ask you this question. What do you most want your students to take away from your teaching? And how should young people approach the problem of thinking that they can't make a difference?
Woo! I want them to recognize that they can make a difference. As a matter of fact, young people change the course of the world. At the end of the day, in every revolution that has ever existed, it has been the young who have been at the front of the line. And so even in high school, I want students to know that they can challenge everyone around them to be better. So like Amanda was saying, she started with a no more styrofoam campaign. I want students to be emboldened to sort of understand the harm that my generation and previous generations has caused, and sort of invite us into broader conversations about how to do things differently. And so I think if more high school students felt like they could do it, they would. And beautifully, I think that more high school students do. I think there is so much power in their Instagram accounts and in their cell phone utility that, man, they are changing the world for the good. And so I think it's a responsibility of educators, for example, to empower students to do that, give them the vocabulary to be respected in the public square, teach them about sustainable goals, and how to actually leverage what they have in their hand to make a difference.
Thank you so much, Dr. Joy. I know we all want to be in your class and in your school, so we'd like to see that every day. We're delighted to welcome Tobias Fox, founder and managing director of Newark Science and Sustainability. Tobias is an urban farming organizer in Newark and coordinator of an annual Sustainable Living Empowerment Conference that takes place each June, I think 9 years and counting. He conducts community events, presentations, and workshops on sustainable living practices and assists many urban farmers and gardeners with cultivating their agricultural space. Tobias's awards include selection for 100 People of Newark as part of Newark's 350th celebration, the 2016 Community Service Award presented by the Northeast Earth Coalition, and he was 2014 Newark NAACP Environmental Justice honoree. Tobias, thank you so much for all your change work in Newark. Tell us when you think growing healthy food is something that we all can know how to do, and whatever else we need to know. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. So urban agriculture, also known as urban farming or urban gardening, is the practice of cultivating, processing, and distributing food in or around urban areas. Urban agriculture is also the term used for animal husbandry, aquaculture, urban beekeeping, and horticulture. These activities occur in peri-urban areas as well. Peri-urban agriculture is generally defined as agriculture undertaken in places on the fringes of urban areas. Just to illustrate the complexity of urban agriculture, I'll further describe how it is used in cities and urban environments, especially as it relates to our organization, Newark SAS. It is important for us to demonstrate how urban agriculture not only contributes to the wellness of the community, but also the local economy. Through our urban agriculture initiative, participants learn the art of gardening and farming in urban environments. Our focus areas include plant management, produce distribution, and increasing residents' access to fresh, healthy food. Operating through the city's Adopt a Lot program, that's the city of Newark, we're able to adopt vacant lots like the one you see here from the city of Newark for $1 and renew the lease annually. The purpose of adopting these lots is to transform them into a green space for community use. Excuse me. This lot is adjacent to a childhood learning center, and when my colleague learned there was very few green spaces for them to visit in this neighborhood, we adopted this lot in 2015 and transformed it into the Garden of Hope. It is our belief that gardens in and of themselves are the real life symbols of hope. Our gardens invigorate people's senses during the day-to-day hustle and bustle. We've been able to transform abandonment into sustainability. The gardens become a gathering place where strangers become friends and to ponder their thoughts amongst the beauty of the garden. In 2018, we launched our Farm to Table Co-op, which follows the model of a community-supported agriculture or CSA program, a system in which a farm operation is supported by shareholders within the community. Individuals are able to make an advance payment of $395 to receive weekly fresh, locally grown produce packages, feeding 2 to 4 people for 20 weeks. There are those who find $395 to be a financial burden, so we launched our Sponsor Family Initiative, which allows people anywhere to purchase a membership and then donate it to a family in need. The sponsor's membership ensures that fresh, healthy food reaches the tables of those residing in neighborhoods throughout Newark that has no reliable access to a sufficient quantity of affordable, nutritious food. Here are two community gardens, two of our community gardens during the peak season with members from our Farm to Table Co-op. And here are a series of activities that occur at gardens throughout Newark. There are currently nearly 20 activities 20 active gardens and or urban farms. We have yoga in the garden, an herbalism workshop, harvesting, a potluck, and hands-on learning activities for youth. And working in collaboration with Urban Agriculture Cooperative and the Newark Community Food System, we also organize these pop-up farm stands and farmers markets, along with annual community events. So this is an urban farm project that we are currently developing in Newark. It will become our headquarters and an agricultural hub center. This is, in fact, the redevelopment of our Garden of Hope. We're now working on transforming it into a year-round sustainable urban farm. It will be the first of its kind in Newark. We'll have an administration facility with a restroom, a walk-in cooler to store produce, a farm stand to sell our produce and other value-added products, a tool shed, an outdoor kitchen, a hydroponic greenhouse, a chicken coop. We'll also be collecting rainwater to run through the greenhouse. We'll have a solar technology to help offset some of our energy costs. We recently launched a capital funding campaign to raise $200,000 to complete the construction and hire a staff to ensure we're sustainable for the next 4 years. When we talk about urban agriculture, I can't leave out indoor farming, which is usually a high-tech soilless practice called hydroponics and or aeroponics. There's also aquaponics. This image is taken from a facility in Newark called Aero Farms, which describes themselves as the largest indoor farm in the world. As climate change intensifies and cities become even more populated, we will see more of these indoor farming operations popping up throughout the country. As we move forward, in urban agriculture continues to play a significant role in community development, we will need policy that supports the creation, protection, and long-term sustainability of urban agriculture, which would help create career pathways for green jobs. The various degree titles you see are being pursued by college students throughout New Jersey that have interned for our organization. Strong policy would also stimulate a local economy and give rise to a new generation of ecopreneurs. An ecopreneur is someone who either creates or sells environmentally friendly or sustainable products and services and spreads awareness about the environment. The products or services could include growing and selling locally grown organic foods, recycling efforts or drives, or green conscious construction. As Richard Buckminster Bucky Fuller, who was an American architect, systems theorist, author, designer, and inventor, stated, in order to change an existing paradigm, you do not struggle and try to change the problematic model. You create a new model and make the old one obsolete. That, in essence, is the higher service to which we are all being called. And as Jacques Fresco, who was an American social engineer and founder of the Venus Project, stated, that if you think we can't change the world, it just means you're not one of those that will. And lastly, I'd like to thank and definitely acknowledge, at the very least, some of our community partners for their collaboration and supporting the work I do through North SACS. And that's all I got.
Great, Tobias. You are really, really inspiring. The range of activity that you fostered is just fantastic. So
Thanks.
I keep thinking it's teachers that need to have full immersion in these things, right? So that they're teaching. I'd like to hear from Dr. Joy later on that. Okay, thank you so much. Over to you, Frida.
And our next presenter is Crystal Wessel. Crystal coordinates the NJTF's Renaissance Trees program in North New Jersey. A native of Galloway, she graduated from Stockton University in Environmental Science and received a master's in sustainability at Montclair State University. Crystal's living her childhood dream of being Captain Planet. She believes green infrastructure addresses many problems at once, such as flooding and pollution, the need for cooling and shade in urban hotspots, and providing a beautiful gathering place for neighbors. When not planting trees, you can find her cooking, dancing, or playing with her cat, Nova. Take it away, Crystal.
Hello, thank you. I have some slides, so I'm going to share my screen. So we were founded in 1998, so we've been around a while. And our mission is that we're dedicated to planting trees in New Jersey's most underserved neighborhoods. So specifically Newark and Camden, but we'll kind of plant anywhere that really needs it. Like Frida had mentioned, we really think that trees are like an easy solution to a lot of different problems. So first of all, we all know they produce oxygen. We literally need them to breathe. And they do this by taking in carbon dioxide, which also helps with climate change. They also help to filter pollutants from the air and the water. They absorb stormwater to decrease flooding, which is definitely a problem in a lot of our North Jersey cities. They provide shade for people walking down the street or people wanting to relax in their yard or in the park. You don't have to sit out underneath the hot summer sun. And the urban heat island effect is when cities are a higher temperature than the surrounding suburban areas. So they help to lower the general temperatures in the cities. And they also have like social benefits. So they can reduce anxiety and improve happiness, decrease like feelings of aggression and anger. Because like, how can you be angry when you're out looking at nature? You know, it's very peaceful. And then relevant to, you know, today's theme, they also provide food and habitat for wildlife and pollinators, especially when you're planting native. So this is our urban airshed reforestation program. This was our first program. We started out in Camden, and at this point, we've planted over 7,000 trees with over 15,000 volunteers. And you can just see like the way that this block looks, you know, before, to be fair, on the before picture, it's like rainy and dreary. So it looks a little blah. But in the second one, you know, it's bright and happy and like you would want to walk down that street. Our Renaissance Trees program is the program that I run. So we're based in Newark, but we do plant everywhere, sort of. We have dedicated funding for Newark, and then we work in other cities if we're able to get grants for them. So if you live in another city and you want trees for your town, email me. This one's a little newer. We've planted over 3,400 trees with over 7,800 volunteers. So the way that my program and the Camden program works is we're very community based. So we don't just go in and pop some trees on the street and call it a day. It's really a community effort. So residents will reach out to us first. Generally, they come to us. We don't come to them because they want to see more trees on their block. And then we'll go around their neighborhood with them with like flyers. We're canvassing all the doors. So we have a minimum number of 10 trees. So we'll get at least, 10 neighbors on board. And then we come in, plant the trees either during spring or fall with volunteers. Most of the time the residents come out and help as well. Like it's always a really nice morning and everyone's involved. And because the residents are involved from the start and we're never going to plant a tree for someone who doesn't want it. So since they do want it and they're very involved in the process, they get to take a lot more ownership of it and like really feel like proud of their tree and take good care of it. And then our other program that Susan mentioned earlier is our Green Streets crew. So this is a way we make money, actually. It's a contract program. So we hire men who are under parole supervision, and they basically plant trees all around the state. We get contracts usually from municipalities, and it's a really good like job training opportunity for them. Because a lot of them have been like incarcerated for years, like decades sometimes. So we help to get them like readjusted into regular life and working, give them letters of recommendation at the end. And we've had guys stay on for like over a year. Sometimes they just really like working with us or, they're really great workers. So we keep them on like even past one season, as long as they want to work with us. we want to hire them. And the Green Streets crew is really awesome. They've planted over 16,000 trees, including South Orange this week. So they're busy, busy, busy. If you're in Jersey City, or if you ever go to Jersey City, Liberty State Park, we also have a Grove of Remembrance, which is just like a memorial for 9/11. We planted a tree for every New Jersey resident who was a victim of 9/11. So we planted them, we maintain them. There's over 750 trees here. So do check it out if you ever want a nice place to walk around. The whole park is really beautiful. And then the most important part is how you can get involved. So, we know how important trees are, how they're a great solution to a lot of different problems. And there's plenty of ways that you can help. So if you have a yard, consider planting trees in it. And then if you want to organize like a street tree planting, or maybe like a park in your town, reach out to me. If you're in Newark or Camden, definitely let me know. We have funding for that. And even if you're not, then I can look for grants for us to be able to fund those plantings. You can also volunteer to plant trees with us. For my program, all of our trees are planted with volunteers. So every spring and fall, I've got several volunteer opportunities. I do have a few in May, but they are actually at capacity, unfortunately, since we had to limit because of COVID. But I will have more in the fall, so don't worry. If you want to come out and plant with us, you can. And then there's also other organizations. Like, we're not the only one. There's the Arbor Day Foundation, One Tree Planted, American Forest, the Nature Conservancy. They're all doing a lot of really cool work with reforestation and planting trees. If you want to just donate, that's good as well. And then another idea is just getting involved in your town's green team or their shade tree commission. And if your town doesn't have one, then start one. And, that might be able to help you get more trees in your town. And that's it.
Excellent, Crystal. Thank you so much for that. And there has been just incredible work done by the New Jersey Tree Foundation. So thank you for letting us know how it works. Congratulations on the community activity that you spur through that program.
Thank you.
Our final speaker tonight is Gary Oppenheimer, founder and executive director of ampleharvest.org. This is an award-winning national nonprofit that enables America's 62 million home gardeners to easily donate their surplus harvest, fruits and vegetables, to one of 9,000 local food pantries across all 50 states. Gary was a CNN hero. He's a master gardener, Rutgers environmental steward, former community garden director, a dancer, I think Israeli folk, and long distance cyclist. And he says after graduating from college in psychology, he became one of the early geeks in the personal computing area. Gary now lives in Newfoundland, New Jersey, after having lived on a boat on the Hudson River in Manhattan since 1978. And we've heard from all these speakers how they're doing change on the ground. We know we have to pick up the pace. So Gary, tell us what we need to know about how we can change now. And thank you for being here.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm delighted to be with all of you. And we want to solve. If anybody gets in touch, there's my contact information. If you're quick with your phone, you can scan the QR code. Otherwise, it'll be on the last slide also. So many people look at a theory of change and see something as convoluted and as messy as this. And they're terrible because they're convoluted and they're messy. I take a very different approach, possibly because I just look at things differently. But the thing to really affect large-scale change is to think simple and to think big. I think the biggest mistake that many people with great ideas has is if they're thinking too small. I'm the founder of ampleharvest.org. It's a nationwide nonprofit based here in New Jersey. We use an information-based solution to deal with sustainable solutions for food waste and hunger. And if you want to learn more, you can visit ampleharvest.org/TED to see the TED Talk. The way we're addressing food waste and hunger isn't by focusing on food. That's what everybody else does, and people just get hungrier. The approach has been to deal with misinformation and missing information as it relates to food waste. And you can read about the theory of change at ampleharvest.org/theory of change. The solutions we have to be very simple. They have to scale to any place, and they have to have lasting impact. My belief is that a good nonprofit should find a problem, solve it, and go home, meaning the solution lasts long after you stop working. The fundamentals of the theory of change is, number one, reach out to people who already want to solve a problem, educate them more about the problem, enable them to solve the problem, and then get out of their way. It's a very simple approach. I'm going to go over two programs that we have that do that. One is ampleharvest.org and the other is Faith Fights Food Waste. So ampleharvest.org is there to address the needs of two separate communities that live side by side across America. I'm going to move my face because Zoom lets me do that and I don't want to block parts of the slide. I've never done that before. We have 62 million people in America who garden. By the way, that's up from 42 million pre-COVID. And we're not talking about farmers. I'm talking about people who are urban, suburban, and rural gardeners. And this is what these people look like, many of us. We also have 54 million people in this country who are food insecure, and they don't know where the next meal is coming from. When they go to a food pantry, they are most likely going to be seeing jars and cans and boxes, but no fresh food, because that's what we've all been told can be donated. The reality is that the gardeners and the hungry families are neighbors. They live side by side. This was an eye-opener for me. I had realized in 2009 that the gardeners, and I'm one of them, hated wasting their surplus. We always wanted to find somebody to give it to, but we were misinformed. We were told we couldn't donate the food, and we missed information. Where do I donate it to, and what's an optimum time for doing it? And the food pantries across America were also misinformed. They thought they couldn't accept food, and they thought they needed refrigeration and storage, which was costly. The idea was to educate and enable the gardeners to donate the food and to enable the food pantries to accept it. We did it by telling the gardeners that they can donate the food, creating a search engine customized for food pantries that includes just-in-time logic that guides the gardener to donate the food hours before the hungry families come in, which eliminates the need for costly refrigeration and storage. The tomato goes from my garden to the food pantry to a hungry family's dinner table in hours, for example. The model looks like this. Typically what would happen would be Sean, and this is a real gardener in Texas, would have been told he couldn't donate his food to the Community Food Bank of New Jersey, which covers our area, because they don't accept fresh food and because the food stays there too long. There's a time problem. But thanks to ampleharvest.org, he gets connected directly to a neighborhood food pantry. This entire loop with the cloud is entirely information-based. Sean always wanted to donate the food. He just thought he couldn't, and he didn't know where. Once that information problem is solved, for the rest of his gardening life, he can donate the food. May 18th of 2009, ampleharvest.org launched with the first food pantry here in New Jersey. Today, we're working with nearly 9,000 food pantries in 4,200 communities in all 50 states. We are going to be extending our work into Indian country later this year and then into Puerto Rico and the remaining territories. The reason you see all these dots is because the issue isn't the food, it's information. The second program is for the faith community. Now, we're not a religious program. We don't preach anything. We don't encourage religion or advocate any religion. But for those of you who grew up with some religion, I'm sure that your pastor, your imam, your rabbi, etc., always spoke about feeding hungry people. But did they ever talk about ending the waste of food so that people would be fed? Typically, the answer is no, even though it's in the scriptures. So this is me when my hair is pretty bad. And I'm trying to talk about food waste along with other food waste experts across the country. But the average person is too busy with other things on their agenda. They're trying to keep the kids out of trouble, pay the bills, etc. We don't get through. But once a week, they go to their church or their synagogue or their mosque or their other house of worship to listen to a faith leader whom they trust talk about faith convictions that they both agree on. So the problem was that we wanted to have the clergy learn about the waste of food as is discussed in all of the faiths. So the idea was to tell the clergy what they needed to know about food waste and then to educate them about what their own faith tradition has to say about it, and provide calls to actions. So we put a program together for Buddhist, Christian, Hindu, Jewish, Muslim, non-sectarian, spiritual, and Unitarian. And we're going to be adding one or two other faiths to this. And we started out with a faithy sounding but faithless sermon, and I cannot say that more than once. And then a partner organization, this is all online, by the way, so you can easily find it, translated it into Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, Unitarian. All these faiths have the same sermon, the same topic, but it's written from the perspective of the Old Testament, the New Testament, the Quran, etc. They then can stand up in front of their congregation with all the tools they need, the sermon they can rewrite to their heart's content, calls to action, and even information, a game show for the religious school, and speak not just about their faith, saying how to help hungry people, but actually how to reduce hunger, reduce and ultimately end hunger and malnutrition in the United States. Susan and everybody else, thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much, Gary, and congratulations on this, making the simple have that impact, and also making room for the spirit. I think the beloved community is what is really at the root of everybody and holding everybody together. So information, misinformation, and gathering together is great. Thank you. Debbie Mans has very, very kindly offered to navigate our question and answer. There could be many, many conversations that spur from this. The interconnections are just fantastic. So I just want to thank our 6 speakers. And Debbie, please take it away if there's things in the chat that might continue for a few minutes.
Okay, great. Thanks, Susan. And thank you to everyone and our great speakers. And I know we're bumping up against our deadline, and I think we'll commit to putting information up on the Facebook event page that was created for this, as well as this whole recording will be available on the South Orange Public Library YouTube channel. So thank you, Michael, for that. So I'm going to take some prerogative and go to my good friend Jess Evans. Had a question. She put in the chat, she claims she doesn't have a green thumb, but would really love to spearhead some initiatives in her township to have more native plants, especially pollinator friendly ones. And any suggestions how she can overcome this? I mean, we had a discussion about what plants to look for, but are there also resources about where to plant and when to plant? Does anyone have any of our presenters have some insight on that?
Well, I'll start. I'm a master gardener, so the first thing you should do is contact Extension in your county. Our job, once we get trained as a master gardener, is to we have to do 60 hours of effectively consulting to our community. So you contact an Extension, whichever county you're in. It's part of the Rutgers program here in New Jersey, and people will actually come to you, to your community, and provide guidance and input. But the very, very, very first thing you want, there's no such thing as a black thumb, by the way, it's just a sooty thumb. Clean it off, it becomes green. The important thing is to test your soil. And Rutgers and every other extension agency has a kit, 25, 30 bucks, whatever it is. You do soil testing. First, you don't want to grow anything that has in soil that has lead in it if someone's going to eat it. But secondly, is the soil too alkaline, too acidic? Is it got too much clay? Find out what's in it, and either amend the soil or plant plants that like growing in that soil. But start with Extension.
That's a great suggestion. Any other presenters want to weigh in? Just unmute yourself.
I'm going to go with the compost solution. And that is, composting is such a forgiving process because it also creates habits of gardening. Getting outside, aerating soil, adding to the soil to fortify it. So, and very beautifully, it's like, if it doesn't grow, that's okay. It becomes something that will eventually provide nutrients, and it gives you at least a couple of weeks, months to sort of get outside, develop habits, and start to see how you could prepare for soil. So building on what Gary just said, you get out, first look at it and see, what does this soil do? What is it? Is it a good draining soil? Is it mostly sand? What is its root system like? And so I think that's always a really good first project for someone to do outside. And you can do it with families and sort of spark the interest and the intrigue as something decomposes and enriches the soil. Again, you can be like, wow. And then you can actually see the color change with the detritus and the, as it just develops. And so I think that's a great community project to have people starting to do something like that. And it'll put worms in the soil, and it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, so we have a quick follow-up question, Dr. Joy, if you're still on your compost, how to avoid weed seeds in your compost. Do you have a quick solution to that? And then I have one last question.
I do have my colleague, she's a gardener, and she says, don't be afraid of weeds. She actually has she says, when you pull weeds, pull them and put them in a bin to allow them to burn in the sun, as opposed, or do lasagna composting with newspaper. And she says that typically will help with that. But she's like, don't be afraid of putting weeds in a compost base away from any other soil plot that you're trying to grow. And she said, put it in the sun or put it in a plastic. She has a plastic composter thing that she throws weeds in, and it cooks them. I declare war. So.
Switching gears a little bit, and I know I have personal experience on this, converting lawns, especially front yards, into vegetable gardens and native plant and perennials. Some of our participants have run up with some municipal ordinances or maybe some aesthetics in town that people have concerns about. Can anyone speak to this idea of since some of us don't have a lot of space and we've converted our front lawns, how to address any sort of ordinances or other perceptions in the neighborhood to overcome that? Besides building a deep relationship with your town inspector, which always helps. Tobias, do you have anything? I don't know if you're still on the line about how you've approached, neighborhoods when you're looking at building your gardens.
So I've done a lot of traveling across the country, and community engagement is one of the challenges, a huge challenge in just about every community I've been in throughout places I've traveled to in the U.S. And so, one of the gardens that I manage, there maybe 1% of the residents in the community actively participate because they recognize it as manual labor, and who wants to do that? Sit in the sun and turn soil and put in plants and knock away mosquitoes and stuff like that. So it's a labor of love, and so we don't expect everyone to want to just jump into it because it's feeding people doesn't mean that everyone is going to run to it, right? And so so those are some of the things that we deal with: land tenureship, community engagement, lack of funding. So people, in my slide, I show the difference between large-scale commercial agriculture versus community grassroots agriculture, right? And so we call it community gardening, community farming, but it's totally different perspectives. So community agriculture, it's can we get a 5,000 grant so we can plant some stuff? Commercial industrial agriculture is $10 million to play with. So totally different ball games, totally different perspectives. We need to kind of acknowledge the complexity of what we are doing with regards to agriculture. And dealing with these challenges, we formed a Newark Community Food System, which is a collective of local growers throughout the city of Newark. It's about 15 to 20 of us. And we come together collectively to kind of deal with a lot of these challenges that we're faced with. It's not easy. We're trying to build allies wherever we can. One of our colleagues just lost her garden in the blink of an eye. $3,000 worth of materials from that garden was thrown away. And so we're trying to recover from that loss as well. So it's a lot, but when you are very passionate about something that you're doing and it serves the good of the community, we just keep at it.
So I think that's it for our questions. So Susan, I'm going to turn it back over to you for the wrap up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Debbie. Thank you for everybody for such stimulating ideas. I think this team of 6, right there, there's synergy to make big change. And for everybody, I think we need to lift our voices. We need to talk to garden centers and ask them for native plants. We need to show up at our town council meetings and just make this concern of health and a healthy environment mainstream. So thank you so much for all the ways you're educating the public, transforming your communities. Thank you so much to our audience for being here tonight. And I just want to close with, at this time of great challenge, this is a moment to affirm our interconnectedness, our need to care for one another and for nature so that human family can heal and flourish. And Hope Jahren said a beautiful thing in her book, The Story of More. She said, ultimately, we have 4 resources: the earth, the ocean, the air, and each other. So thank you on this last day of Earth Month, and start planting tomorrow. And we hope to have more conversations like this. And thank you to the South Orange Public Library.